Is there sound? Is there sound? Is there sound? Is there sound? Well, we'll just assume there's sound. We're on episode 2 of the Latchkey Kid movie review. This one, we're going to explore the narcissism of Ferris Bueller and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. And a little note on the term Latchkey Kid. Is there sound? Is there sound? If anyone's here, say sound. Say there's sound. So last episode, I described myself as a latchkey kid, and both my parents listened to it, and my mama got a little bit in her feels about it. Oh, good. There's sound. There's sound. Everybody, there's sound. There's sound. So my mama got in her feels about me referring to myself as a latchkey kid, because I'm assuming she felt like maybe she didn't do a good job, and that's not what I'm trying to project here. My mama and my daddy were just, victims of, a fiscal conservatism that was just moving its way through the fucking country, where, they were like, put everybody to work. The mamas, the daddies, everybody had to go to work. And that left us, Generation X, vastly unsupervised. And they had to participate in the system. It's not an opt-in system. So I don't want my mama or anybody other's mamas who may listen to this or who may think that being a latchkey kid is some sort of disparagement of you. It's not. Like, you just did what you had to do. Mamas had to join the workplace, and there wasn't a lot of daycare options available. So hey, if a kid had to let him get off the bus and let himself in and watch HBO for a few hours, then that's just the way it went. I certainly don't feel any worse for it. I have a better appreciation of the arts. And basically, I had a lot of time in the morning before I got on the bus, a lot of time in the afternoon after I got off the bus, and then after my exhausted parents from working so hard went to bed at night, then I got a couple little more hours at night as well to watch, shit like Ferris Bueller, the movie we're gonna do today. And our Generation X, was dictated to these. They, whether we liked it or not, they helped. These things taught us how to be kids, and to a certain extent how to be grown-ups, as time moved on. And I'm gonna refer to my own experiences as a typical Gen X kid, as we go through the review. But we were inundated with a lot of media, probably more than any generation before us. And to a certain extent, like kids today, they holler at each other. Like social media is huge now, but we didn't have that as much. We had media, like movies and television and whatnot. But the movies in particular, we had VCRs were big, and we could tape movies off of HBO. We had HBO just hammering us over and over again with the same movie. So we started to view them multiple times, which no generation before us was able to do. And then we could tape them, and then that would add a couple more viewings on it. And we had access to 3, 4, 5 movie channels, and we could go to the movie store, video over there in the what the fuck? I forgot the name of that little shopping center there in West Pensacola where video is. Somebody from Pensacola helped me out with that. It was there was like a fucking pizza buffet there. There was a little diner there. A Gaffer's was there. The West Side Gaffer's. Anybody from Pensacola? All right, well, holla back at me when you do that. They had a video store there called Video, and you go and you walk the aisles, and there was a little porno spot over there where you could kind of like look in there and see and shit like that. You couldn't cross the little yellow line, because that's where the pornography was. And there was always some like creeper in there. Anyways, this film, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, is one that I actually saw in the theater. So I saw it there, and then eventually I kind of started watching it over and over again on HBO and shit like that, and taped it, and shit happened. It kind of became the movie it is now. But I'll go through it like narratively, chronologically. The film opens, with a description of the weather in Chicago. All John Hughes movies are set in Chicago. I already kind of went over him a little bit in the last episode about how good or bad he's aged. The films have aged, some of them better than others. Kind of there's some offensive shit in them, but whatever. It was like fucking 30 years ago, but definitely bears pointing out. We open up to a beautiful day. It's like weather's beautiful in Chicago, and this sets the tone. Ferris doesn't want to go to school because the weather's so nice in Chicago, and the weather kind of plays a supporting character throughout the movie. There's constant shots of it and references to it and such. And within the first few scenes we have, now I'm going to talk about 80s cars in this, because that was another little part of our growing up, is that we had some bizarre fucking cars. People were trying new things with automobiles back in the 80s and shit, and it's not quite the same now. Now people are a little bit more, car companies are a little bit more conservative about the cars that they're just going to put out there. But in the 80s, they were just putting fucking all kinds of fucked up shit out on the road. And one of my all-time favorites, my brother had one, and it was white, appears in the first scene of Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and that's the Pontiac Fiero. Every now and then you still see one. And whenever I do, it's like seeing a bald damn eagle or something. I go, holy shit, it's a fucking Pontiac Fiero. And I'm shocked that any are still on the road, because they were not great cars. They had a rear-mounted engine, so you would like throw your shit in the trunk, or the trunk was in the front, like a VW and shit. And it was a 2-seater car. It was gimmicked as fucking hell, concept as hell. And every now and then you still see one, and it's awesome. There was one, I think Badger in Breaking Bad. He had a gold one, and that was like the last time I saw one in popular culture. But they were fucked up cars. Anyways, Ferris's sister Jeannie drives one, and that fits her personality. They cut from the Fiero, and then we gaze into the eyes of our sociopath, of Ferris, a kid with no redeeming values. Everybody loves him, but I see through this fucker. I know that this motherfucker is a sociopath, and as we go through the movie, I'm going to list in no uncertain terms every sociopathic quality that he exhibits. He runs his first scam of the day. He's trying to stay home from school. His parents are marks. They completely fall for his shit. And you would think a regular person, a non-sociopath, a non-narcissist, would sort of feel bad about this. But he just revels in how he manipulates his parents. And as the movie moves on, like everybody around him. Shit. But his sister Jeannie hates him, like, naturally. She sees through him. She's sort of the conscious of the movie. But he kind of encourages her to play along, which she reluctantly does. Oh, and he really hams up the sickness. And his parents are totally oblivious dumbasses. They have no idea. And that's narcissist trait number one that Ferris exhibits. There's going to be like 6 or 7. But number one is exploiting others to achieve personal gain, which he is going to do several times throughout the movie also. And his first is when he convinces his parents that they don't need to go to school. He has no remorse. He's only self-satisfaction. He has done this several times this year, stayed home from school, and presumably he's done it 9 times. Presumably none of them were legitimate. Like, he's pulled this scam over and over and over again. He's a serial sick, he plays sick in a serial way. And he breaks the fourth wall a lot, which is also kind of creepy. You can't really say that's a narcissist quality, but it just makes the character of Ferris that much more, creepy, and in my humble opinion, annoying as fuck. And we're kind of a captive audience to that, so that adds to the creepiness as well. We can't escape them. I mean, I know we chose to sit here, and watch the movie, but it does kind of, give me the, heebie-jeebies. And then he brags more and more about his menagerie of lies. Then, he gets in the shower and he says he's supposed to have a test on, what is it? European socialism. And he dismisses not only that, but also any world events and all the world's struggles. Simply because he doesn't care about it, because he says, because I don't have a car. There's all this shit going on in the world, but I don't have a car. It's a self-centered outlook that is going to continue throughout the movie. Also, as he's doing this, he quotes John Lennon, and John Lennon, coincidentally, was the most narcissist Beatle. So him and Ferris got a lot going on, but I mean, I don't want to get into a, which Beatle was the best, even though it was George Harrison. So then we cut to Ferris's school, where Ferris is supposed to, be. We have former Richard Nixon speechwriter Ben Stein makes his appearance in the movie, and he calls roll very famously. And anybody ever since that kind of got into the Gen X latchkey kid mindset, and whenever we were calling out to somebody that we knew wasn't around or was detached in some way, we would just cue Ben Stein saying Bueller, 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 and that is basically not getting out of the lexicon for a few decades, until all the Gen Xers are dead and most of our kids are. That is definitely in there. Future star, I guess Christy Swanson appears in that scene very shortly. She may have been a Buffy the Vampire Slayer or something like that. She was one of those. And then we cut to the real fucking star of the movie. The real main character of the movie. We cut to Cameron, who is Ferris's, well, I wouldn't say his friend, because narcissists don't have friends, but he's Ferris's little lackey. Very obviously depressed child. And Ferris asks him how he's doing, and this is like sort of depressed speak. He says, I'm shredded. So clearly, his emotional state is, tender. But Ferris just dismisses all that. Ferris doesn't have feelings. So he just was whatever. And the reason why he dismisses it is because Cameron has a car. Ferris doesn't. Ferris has a computer. His sister had a car, and he's, jealous of that and whatnot. But he basically needs Cameron because Cameron can drive him around and shit. And he can enjoy his, day off, as in the movie's title. But his manipulation and using of Cameron for his car is narcissist trait number 2, which is lack of empathy for the negative impact they have on the feelings, wishes, and needs of other people. So Cameron has stated that he's sick. Cameron has stated that he doesn't feel good. Cameron has stated that he doesn't want to leave the house that day. But Ferris insists and almost bullies him into, doing it. And Ferris will continue to do that to Cameron for the rest of the movie. That relationship never really exceeds that dynamic. Ferris needs Cameron to drive him around. Ferris needs Cameron to do all these other things. And we'll sort of explore why Cameron sort of needs Ferris as well as the movie unfolds. So then there are 2 people in the whole movie who see through Ferris's bullshit. And one is his sister Jeannie, who kind of plays along with it, but the other is Principal Rooney, played by Jeffrey Jones, who caught him some charges, I think, many years after this, and they were kind of maybe child porny, child molesty, attempt to be child porny, something like that. But it was something like you know, can't. I mean, we're not talking jerking off in a theater here. We're talking like that's beyond that. Whatever your Fred Ward's RIP, your Pee Wee Herman's, they're jerking off in a theater. It's a porn theater. What else are you gonna fucking do there, right? But you can't. No, Jeffrey Jones, no. But somebody else looked that up. But I do believe he caught him some charges on something like that. So Rooney attempts to bust Ferris in his absences and use that to fuck with Ferris and fuck with his mama and fuck with his parents and shit like that. But Ferris, because remember, as we learned in the previous episode, in the 80s, computers can do anything. If you had a little fucking tiny little Commodore 64 or whatever, you could hack the school's attendance records, right? So Ferris goes ahead and does that and wipes out all of his previous attendances. Now, I want to mention here that in West Pensacola, some partners of mine, I won't mention their names, they did something similar to that at Escambia, except we didn't really have like personal computers. So they broke in the attendance office and burned all the attendance records. And I won't mention their names. I mean, I think the statute of limitations is up, but some of my partners did that, and it was like another one of those times when my partners were just way ahead of me in the things they did. I was just like, nope, I'm not doing that. But that was the West Pensacola version of what Ferris did here. There's a brief scene in which Ferris poorly plays a clarinet, and he brags about never even having one lesson, which is narcissist personality trait number 3. Self-perception of being unique and superior, because the clarinet playing is pretty fucking bad. But when he hears it, it's just magic, right? Fucking narcissist. Now, contrary to Weird Science and a lot of the other John Hughes movies, style is not great in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. It takes place in fictional Shermer High, which a lot of them do, and everybody's just kind of wearing some Midwestern styles, a lot of plain shirts and a lot of plain jeans and whatnot. Ferris's girlfriend, Simone, what's her name? We'll get to her. Anyway, she wears a pretty badass fringe white leather jacket in one of the scenes, but the flick is kind of a little bit void of 80s style, which when you're watching these things, I ain't saying the 80s style was good, but it was like the Cars. We were trying new things back then. We were throwing everything at, everything was a concept. So the style was too. Unfortunately, it's just not on as good a display as it could. Oh, see? In 2003, thank you, Cody Beck, Jeffrey Jones pleaded no contest to soliciting a minor to pose for nude photographs and had subsequent arrest for failing to update his sex offender status. See, that's bad, Jeffrey Jones. That's why we don't hear from Jeffrey Jones much anymore. Lost his whole career on account of some bullshit like that. Don't need to be fucking around. I should mention that Edie McClure plays Principal Rooney's secretary. She does a fucking kick-ass job. She was Mrs. Poole in maybe the Hogan Family or Valerie. They were the same show in one of those family sitcoms back in the 80s, and she was pretty good in that. She's good in every damn thing. You can't fade Edie McClure. She's good shit. Oh, Ferris's sister calls him a trouser snake in one scene, which made me laugh out loud. Um, Ferris gets on the phone, and again, he's adding more people to his menagerie of lies. He's telling all his friends and his classmates about his condition. He's lying. He's got a keyboard in which he's portraying himself as coughing and so on and so forth. And he just, there's no end to the lies that Ferris will project upon the universe in true narcissist fashion. He repeatedly tries to get Cameron to go out, again, because he just needs a ride. And they have a very abusive and manipulative relationship. And Cameron is the abused, and Ferris is the abuser. And we find out, rather quickly that Cameron is a victim of is involved in several abusive relationships in his life. With his father, with his mother, and with Ferris, and with the universe in general. There is an 80s mobile that we spot, an Alfa Romeo sports sedan. That is, I believe, Cameron's car. Cameron agrees to go pick up Ferris, and his unique 80s mobile is an Alfa Romeo sports sedan, which is, you don't see those around much anymore. Alfa Romeo, not a great manufacturer. So we have Sloane. That's Ferris's girlfriend, not Simone. Sloane, and Ferris fabricates the death of a loved one. Now that's pretty fucking sociopath shit. He fabricates the death of a loved one so he can get his girlfriend out of school. And now you're messing with death. Now you're trying to, not only is there Sloane's real grandma out there, but her death is being conjured into the universe. If you believe that, that you can speak things into action, then that's what's happening. And then now you got Ferris, like, Sloane's getting all this sympathy from people about the death of her grandma. She's got to play along in this menagerie, and Ferris is he could give a fuck, because he just wants, female company, and he just wants Cameron to, give him a ride around. So there's all these people that have to get folded into his, narcissistic plan just to, so he can have a good day. It's all part of, Ferris's vision of the day and shit. Cameron does, he's with Ferris now, and then he does a pretty decent impression of an entitled Midwestern man when he's talking on the phone with Principal Rooney and his ever-supportive secretary, Eda McClurg. I forgot her name in this, but she always kicks ass. So Cameron gets on the phone. The phone has a cord, which is great. It's one of those long ones, the receiver and everything and the buttons are all on the same in the receiver and all that. Great shit. Looks like an antique now. Presumably, this is a nice house and with nice things, and the phone just looks a little chintzy. So Cameron's trying to get get Sloane out of school. He makes a few little logistical errors when he's talking in his entitled Midwestern accent to Grace. Thank you, JD. Grace. His secretary's name is Grace. Eda McClurg. Grace! And he kind of, is an abusive boss to her a little bit too, but whatever. So Cameron makes a few little logistic errors in the phone conversation, and Ferris kind of comes down on him a little hard, and that brings us to narcissist trait number 5. Although we may have skipped number 4. No, number 4 is the need for reassurance and support from others. Oh, that's what it is. He checked his girlfriend out of school because he wants, his best friend and his girlfriend around to, basically lift him up and make him look good. I mean, she is pretty fine and stuff. So Cameron fucks up the phone conversation with the principal, and Ferris reacts with narcissist trait number 5. Demeaning and belittling others and those around him. Cameron protests, and he tries to nullify and downplay Cameron's feelings by he tells him his feelings aren't great. I mean, your feelings are wrong, and my feelings on this are incorrect. If I hurt your feelings, then your feelings are what's wrong, not the actions of what I did. So that's pretty manipulative and stuff. They have a fight, and Cameron sticks up for himself, threatens to go home, and only when Ferris is threatened with losing of Cameron going home and thus taking his car with him, only then does Ferris feign an apology and such. And so only when something that Ferris wants and desires, only when Ferris's needs are threatened, then he becomes conciliatory. It's trademark narcissist shit. Even that's a ploy though, because he further manipulates Cameron into driving to the school in a very rare 1961 Ferrari that his dad owns, that Cameron is terrified of anyone even touching or looking at. And my father has rare cars, and I'm telling you, that fear is real. Like you do not yourself want to be around them, and you damn sure don't want your friends around them, especially some little fuckhead like trouser snake like fucking Ferris. So Cameron has very real feelings about this, and as well as he fucking should. Because Ferris is a manipulative little shit. And, well, we all know what happens, because I'm sure nobody's not seen the movie. But they steal this motherfucker's car. And instead of assuming any blame for it, Ferris simply says it's Cameron's father's own fault for not locking the garage. And then he sort of, in true narcissist fashion, he sort of poses and preens in a little, skinny gray suit like that they had, such was the style in the 80s and such. And he just you can really feel like as he gets into the car that he feels as though it's an entitlement to him and such, which is narcissist trait number 6. A sense of entitlement to special treatment and to the obedience of others. And there's a couple more. So they end up stealing the fucking car, right? They pick up Sloane, and Ferris is dressed as Sloane's dad, and there's a kind of weird scene, John Hughes. There's a kind of weird scene where they pick him up, and they passionately make out in front of Rooney. It's a weird scene. I guess there's a lot of things back in the day that we watched and that it just didn't even register with us that the shit was weird. It happened a couple times in Weird Science. The next one I'm going to do, 16 Candles, it happens a lot in that, and it happens several times in this. But whatever, I guess it was part of the comedy. We'll chalk it up to comedy, and we won't give John Hughes such a hard time about this one. But they pick up Sloane and they drive off 2 Oldsmobiles in the parking lot as they pull out. The first one is a 79 Volkswagen Rabbit, and it is that green color that I went to back and forth to summer school in Tiffany Burst's 79 Volkswagen Rabbit. I don't think she's out there watching tonight, but anybody who remembers her, shout out Tiffany Burst and her Volkswagen Rabbit. It was not a good-looking car. The one thing about the Volkswagen Rabbit is the convertibles highly sought after, cute, sporty, cool as shit to ride around in. The hardtops, far less. It went from the value dropped $3,000. Once you put the hardtop on, they're like Volkswagen Bugs, Hardtop back in the day, not so great. Everybody kind of had one. Holla at D. Fawcett in her pink one, named Charlotte. And then but if you had that convertible one, bam, instant cool. And this one is special to me. Next to the 79 Volkswagen Rabbit, there's an early 80s style, I don't know the year, but Chevy Camaro, which yours truly drove and had, and good times were had in it. It was a piece of shit. Had a carburetor still, V6. It was a Berlinetta, whatever the fuck a Berlinetta is, but it was a type of car. But I had one. So those are two classic 80s mobiles in it. Part of the fun of watching these old movies, um, and a lot of these I haven't seen since back in the day, is seeing those tiny little archaic products that were in the background. In fact, when I was watching Stranger Things, and there was a lot of other 80s, 90s nostalgia movies that came out the last couple years, I would watch them and I'd be like, yeah, I guess they're getting that right. I guess they got that right. And then I would watch like a movie from the actual 80s and be like, oh man, they're really going over the top with this 80s nostalgia and this shit. And nope, it was actually just really watching an 80s movie. So, Rooney begins to feel as though he is losing control over the whole fucking student body of the high school. His influence over them, his grasp is weakening, and they are all over Ferris. They're all worried about him. He has an immense amount of control over the masses in Shermer High, and he sees it as such a threat that he straight up fucking leaves campus and goes and is set on going out and finding fucking Ferris out there. And, now the game is on. Now the plot is starting to unfold of the movie. The movie has a good plot. Some of these John Hughes movies, the plot is, but this one, it moves along in a natural fashion, particularly Cameron's arc, which we'll talk about at the end. They bring the car to a parking lot garage. They drop it off with some minority guys. Ferris asks them if they speak English. It's all kind of racist kind of. So his mom goes home to check on him. And the degree in which Ferris is willing to go through his own deceptions is pretty remarkable. He sets up a stereo which plays him snoring. He sets up a mannequin in his bed that is rigged up with a Rube Goldberg device to toss and move and stuff. So it's pretty sick shit, what this kid is at such a young age, what this kid is going, puts his parents through. These are his parents. Like they take care of him. They love him. They seem like they're decent people. None of them are very, assholes or drunks or anything, but it doesn't stop him. It doesn't stop the narcissist. Ferris's mom, when she comes to check on him, she's got a pretty sweet business casual 80s style outfit on. Check it out when you watch the movie. We get a little now Ferris and Cameron and them are out and about. We get a good shot of the Sears Tower. Cameron is already acting very uncomfortable with it. His dad knows the mileage, so I don't see how they were ever going to pull this off, but whatever. Cameron is so in his head about seeing it about his dad out there that he thinks he sees him everywhere. That's how fucked in the head Cameron is. That's how not good of a time Cameron is having. Doesn't stop Ferris though. They try and connive their way into a fancy restaurant because narcissist trait number 7 is, where are we at? Self-perception of being unique, superior, and associated with high-status people and institutions. So they try and go to this, fancy schmancy restaurant so they can appear, highfalutin and such. They go to a Cubs game after that. Rooney's in a pizza place, just misses him on TV. There's a crowd shot. I think Ferris catches the ball. Rooney just misses him on TV. The pizza place is strangely not that Chicago deep dish, which I thought if you were setting a film in Chicago, you would have that fucking Chicago pizza. Nope, it's just regular old kind. Now Cameron starts to loosen up a little bit, and as soon as that happens, Ferris is on him, and it's like, "See, I told you we should have stole the car. I told you should have, done my bidding, so on and so forth." So he's, now he's augmenting his plan and his manipulation of Cameron. Every little thing that he sees that justifies it, he augments it, and every little thing that doesn't quite add up to it, he dismisses. Jeannie and Rooney are both, Jeannie, Ferris's sister, and Rooney are both on to Ferris's plan, and they both hate Ferris, but if they can't get it together, if them two would have just somehow managed to combine forces, then they could have really been a threat to Ferris. They do not, though. And now we get into Cameron a little bit more. So I keep having to drive home that Cameron's story is the story of this film. Ferris is a narcissist. He doesn't change throughout. Cameron goes through a profound change in the course of a 8-hour day, and his story is the more interesting, and he is the more interesting character. He is the more developed character. They start talking about his family situation, and it's sort of suggested that he's always sick, so that he internalizes all his family drama and strife into physical sickness and whatnot. Ferris admits that stealing the car was quite a coup, but again, he justifies it by saying Cameron needed to be challenged. Just adding to his oh, thank you, brother. I think that someone was making a comment about the rabbit. It's a famous artist and it's a knockout, but whatever. I collect rabbits, so most people who know me know that. So Ferris says, "Oh well, you needed to be challenged," and then he immediately also adds that he really just wanted to drive it, and that he loves the status he gives him, referencing back narcissist trait number 7. He's full of them. Anyways, Rooney, as he's chasing him, his fatal flaw is his obsession with finding and busting Ferris. Like, I guess he's not challenged enough at his job, and maybe Ferris presents that sort of challenge to him, Ahab like white whale. But just like Ahab, Rooney becomes obsessed and then consumed. Always a good parable there. That story is old as hell and good as hell, and you could just watch it forever. Evidence of Rooney's obsession is that there's a new wave girl in, I think it's the pizza place, where he thinks it's Ferris. He creeps up on her and he grabs her, and she sees it, and she ain't having none of it. Don't fuck with them little short-haired new wave girls in the 80s. Spits in his fucking face. And further detailing, we're going to jump ahead, but then we're going to jump right back. Further detailing, the madness and the obsession of Rooney. He goes to Ferris's house later in the movie. He commits a B&E, breaks into it. He loses his shoes. He ruins his suit outside of Ferris's house. He's mauled by a dog, the family dog. He doses the dog with flowers and that were meant for Ferris. He steals flowers that were meant for Ferris, and he steals them, and he doses the family dog with him. I mean, man, get a hold of yourself, Rooney. He gets probably concussed in a fight with Jeannie later on in the film. He gets a parking ticket and then gets his towed away. And as his car's getting towed, he's trying to get into it, and they drive off with his keys. That is pretty much the ruin of Rooney. I just wanted to, go through it real quick while we were talking about his obsession and what obsession can do to somebody, especially that spiteful obsession that he so clearly has for Ferris. Ferris and them go to an art museum, and Hughes gets to show off a little bit his directing skills, his skills as a film director and an artist. But it's hard to fuck up in an art museum if you're a movie director. You got figures in an art museum. You've got classical music playing. You can't really fuck that up. So kudos. It's a beautiful series of shots. Kudos to John Hughes. But I mean, how can you fuck it up? Cameron has a moment at the art museum, further deepening his character, further making his character that much more intriguing. He focuses on this little boy and becomes so lost in the little boy who's, not exactly the central figure of this painting that he's looking at. He just begins to stare deeper and deeper into the little boy, so much so that he can visualize the threads in the canvas underneath the little boy. Cameron is gazing into himself in the scene. It's good shit. Good job in that little sequence there, John Hughes. They go to a parade after this. And Ferris exhibits narcissist trait number 8, needing to be the center of attention. I'm sure you all remember the scene. He gets up on a float. He inserts himself onto a float. He sings Shake It Up Baby, a couple more songs. He's a smarmy little shit, and he knows it. And while this is all happening, Cameron and Sloane kind of have a moment, and they sort of mutually agree that he's a little bit further out than them. Not necessarily better, but just a little bit more energized by the universe. That maybe they have less ambitions or less motivations at this stage in their life. They share an embrace and some real affection, for each other and for Ferris and for this time in their lives, basically. And Cameron says they are like, what the fuck is going to happen to Ferris? Now, if you listen to the last episode, we did a where are the characters now, not where the actors are now, but where the characters are now. And we're going to do that at the end of that of this episode too. So it's really cool that they wonder what the hell is going to happen to Ferris. And Cameron says he's going to be a fry cook on Venus. So this is telling to me there's a duality to that. So Cameron suggests that Ferris is going to go far, but not high. So he's going to get around, but he's always going to kind of be at the same social status of his life. He's going to go far. He's going to go to Venus, but fry cook on Venus. Far, but not high. Jeannie makes her way home to bust Ferris too. She's going to have a rendezvous with Principal Rooney. They should have two people with similar goals. But Rooney's he's far along in his obsession. He's an intruder in her house. So he hilariously kicks his ass. Pretty well filmed scene too. The day for Cameron and Ferris and them is winding down, and Cameron finally admits that he feels good and that he's been busted out of the malaise that he had that morning. And that's when they discover that the car that the dudes who run the parking garage took the car for a joyride, and they've added many more miles to it, probably another 180 or so miles to the little Ferrari. And Ferris recognizes that Cameron's going to freak out, and he does. There's a great shot of his mouth screaming out, echoing throughout all of Chicago. And then he proceeds to immediately, right when he was having a good time, immediately has a nervous breakdown. All the gaslit students have gone buck wild over Ferris, and they send him a nasty balloongram that Jeannie gets. Louis Anderson is to the right of the balloongram lady. Obese comic Louis Anderson. Still alive too. Hanging in there, Louis. Because, usually you say obese comic. You don't expect. Obese comic in a movie from the mid-'80s, definitely probably don't expect the guy to be around anymore. But nope. Louis, who I never really expected to go. I expected the guy to be dead 20 years ago. But no, he's still around. Cameron is catatonic from his nervous breakdown. He has one of those where he's just catatonic, like Gary and Wyatt's grandparents, except Lisa didn't do it to him. Ferris did. So Ferris, during this whole thing, his friends fucked up, and it's basically his fault. He just speaks to the camera about how they didn't really have much of a future anyways. Like, he's like, hey, well, you know, we were going to grow apart anyways. I was going to go to one college and he was going to go to another. Sloan was going to stay back because I'm assuming she's an underclassman. So basically, while his friend's in all this fucking trauma that he caused, all he talks about is like, oh, well, we weren't going to have a long friendship anyways. Well, what a fucking dick, right? So then, while Cameron's sitting there, he speculates that Cameron will just end up in an abusive relationship with a woman, the first one he has sex with. This is like fucked up shit that he's saying about his partner. His partner's just sitting right there. He doesn't know if he can hear him or not. But he says, oh yeah, he's gonna, you know, marry the first woman he lays, and she's gonna treat him like shit. Ferris is completely unaware at this point that Cameron is already in an abusive relationship with him. Or maybe he does know, and he's just projecting it onto Cameron's future wife. Sloan appeals to Ferris and is like, man, we should help him and do something. And so what's Ferris's plan? You know, to help his partner who's catatonic? Let's get in our underwear and hang out in a hot tub. Why don't you, his girl's trying to help him out, trying to, you know, is showing, you know, concern for his best friend, and he's like, why don't you take your clothes off and we'll hang out in the hot tub, you know? What a piece of shit. But that's what he does. That's how he handles it. He speculates several times that Cameron's faking it, that he's not being genuine in, you know, his nervous breakdown. To which Cameron responds, he jumps in the pool in a maybe fake or maybe not, I don't know, suicide attempt. Ferris saves him. How does Jeannie end up in the police station? I don't know. I don't have that in my notes. Anyways, in every one of these movies, last week it was Bill Paxton. I'm going to do A Star is Born about one of the actors or actresses in the flick. And Jeannie ends up in the police station, and then we have our A Star is Born moment when the camera focuses on Charlie Sheen in his natural state. We didn't know it at the time. We thought he was a good boy. We thought he was a up-and-coming thespian actor who had a long career ahead of him. But little did we know that the Charlie Sheen that's in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, short screen time that it is, short but good, we were truly looking at the Charlie Sheen that we would all come to know, and some of us would love later on in life. He does a really good job in this. A Star was Born. He ministers to Jeannie about her philosophies, asks her the real questions, gets into her head, gets into her soul. Has a really funny line about drugs. With a great delivery, she says, he says, drugs? She says, what? And he says, are you in here for drugs? And she says, why are you in here? He says, drugs? Great delivery. A Star was Born, Charlie Sheen. So back to Cameron and Ferris and them. They're trying to reverse the miles on the car by running it in backwards, which I, even at the time, was like, I don't know if that's going to work. I was like fucking 10 years old. But I was like, I don't know if that's going to work. But if it is, great. But even young Lance was skeptical. While this is happening, maybe it's the hum of the wheels, maybe it's everything that he had been through that day, maybe it's as he's coming down off of his nervous breakdown, Cameron has like this moment of clarity as a breakthrough. And he's tired, y'all. He's tired of the anxiety and the depression, and his character's arc completes here. he becomes a changed character. He has decided that he cannot bear his anxiety and his depression and his mental illness any longer. And Sloane notes that Cameron may have watched her change while he was catatonic. She also kind of suggests, well, how catatonic were you? Did you see me take my clothes off? And they exchange a little bit more affection. So there's a tiny little hint throughout the movie of this affection between Sloane and Cameron, even if this one's a little sexier than the previous one. But he further completes his transformation by trashing the car, kicking the car so many times that he knocks it off the jack that they had it on, and it flies through the window. We all remember the scene. It's pretty amazing. The house is built up on a hill. It's got glass walls, so the Ferrari just goes right over that. Cameron walks over, and Ferris says he's going to take the blame. It's the only selfless act that Ferris commits in this entire movie. But even he says, I'll take the heat for it because I can handle it better. So what he's saying is, I'll take the heat for it because I don't give a fuck about any of this shit anyways. I'm a fucking narcissist. So even his selfless act is just him depending on his own narcissism and lack of fucks to give. But it was a nice thing for him to do. He's a young narcissist. They don't start getting really fucked up and manipulative until their 30s. They're learning it all in their 20s. They're kind of getting their base around them. They're like fucking Batman up in the hills with Liam Neeson and shit. They're learning their little narcissist skills. And right around their 30s is when they kind of hit their peak. And then sometimes, but often. So Ferris may have a little bit of human left in him. There's that one indication of it anyways. Jeannie starts making out with Charlie Sheen right there in the police station. So her character kind of goes through an arc too. She's like, fuck all this. I'm going to make out with this hot guy, drug addict, in a fucking police station. They both were later in Red Dawn together. So that was cool. And she was in Red Dawn with Patrick Swayze too, and they were in something together. What was it? What were they in together? Jennifer Grey and Patrick Swayze? Something. One of them flicks back in the 80s. But it is not over for Ferris. He still has to get home. He has to complete his lie. Everything he's been through, the trashing of the car, singing on a float, he could just come home and admit his lie and just take the heat. But nope. He has to complete his lie. It's in his head that he has to do this, that it all has to be perfect. He's not learned anything, basically. He bids adieu to Sloane. He dabbles in telling her that they're going to get married one day, but he also said privately to the camera that no way it's happening. Also, as he's running home, he just said goodbye to Sloane. They both talked about getting married and stuff. On the way home, he's running through a yard. He sees two hot chicks sunbathing. He stops and chats them up and introduces himself. So he had just got done telling Sloane that he was going to marry her. And then 2 minutes later, he's flirting with these chicks in their bathing suits in a yard. Narcissist. Chase begins. Chase against time. He runs. It's well filmed by Hughes. He runs through several yards, and there's some great music playing, and then the pulse is going. It's pretty good. Good job, John Hughes. As his dad's trying to get home, he's stuck behind an old lady, and that's another 80s mobile. This lady is in a fucking 85 Lincoln Town Car. These motherfuckers were status symbols back in the day. Chef Brill, to anyone who ever worked at Perdido Beach Resort, he had one that he parked, like all the other employees at Perdido Beach Resort had to park at his way the fuck far away parking lot and walk down this hot ass road to get to the hotel. Well, this motherfucker just pulled right up to the front door and parked his Lincoln Town Car there and walked all in. Big bellied chef, German, blah, blah, blah. anyone who ever worked there at the Perdido Beach Resort out in Orange Beach, Alabama, they know him. Anyways, he drove one of these 80s Lincoln Town cars, and they were boxy and big. You can't miss them. Don't see a lot of them on the road anymore. He trespasses a lot on his way home, Ferris. And then he has his final confrontation with Rooney. He threatens to flunk him, but Jeannie, I guess maybe because, you know, she got a little titillated by Charlie Sheen and now she's changed her attitude, she saves him. You know, she saves him. She could have knocked him out each time, but in the end she ends up saving him. It's not really said why. It's not really said why, but whatever. Maybe she's got a victim complex. I don't fucking know. But it all works out for Ferris. Like so many narcissists, he comes out on top. It all works out for him. Everyone remains gaslit by him. His mom asks him how he got to be so sweet. And he says, years of practice, years of practice. Years of practice gaslighting people. There's a skill to it. That's for sure. What she really should have said was, how do you get to be so manipulative? But we start to depart. We hear Ferris's motto, his core motto, which is life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop to take a look around, it might pass you up or some shit like that. That's an ode to a slacker devoid of responsibility. And then in the credit scene, we see just the end of Rooney. What's become of him? Ferris ends up okay. Cameron is a changed man. Sloane, just like most John Hughes female characters, really was just kind of window dressing the whole time. But in the credit scene, we see Rooney's destruction is complete because he's forced to ride the bus home with the freshmen. I don't know about y'all's high school, but in my high school, riding the bus was the lowest of the low forms of getting to school. It was, you rode the bus, your parents took you, which, as we all know, we were latchkey kids, so not a lot of availability for that. Or you had a friend with a fucking car, and that was the coolest way. Or you yourself had a car. Those were the 4 degrees of getting to school. I made friends. My brother was a couple years ahead of me, so I had already his friends that could take me to school. My parents kind of already knew them. So I didn't have to ride the bus very much. But anytime I couldn't swing a ride, then I had to march my ass out onto the bus. So Rooney's being on the bus is kind of the ultimate degradation for him and his character. So that's it. That's the narcissism of Ferris Bueller. Cameron is the guy who really goes through something in the movie. Ferris stays the same. Rooney goes through something, not in the great way, not in a good way. And then we come to the where are the characters now? Not where the actors are, but what became of these characters after this movie. And we'll start with Rooney. I guess that's all I got. Yeah. I just got Rooney, Jeannie, Cameron, and Ferris. Rooney, he stays at Shermer High. He doesn't leave. I mean, Grace stays there with him. His trauma from the encounter with Ferris leaves him with a kind of a case of PTSD, and he keeps it relatively in check. But in every few years, he sees in a kid Ferris Bueller, and the entire cycle of harassment begins again. And he's sort of faced to live through the trauma of what Ferris put him through again and again and again. He's like cursed to it over and over, like that episode of Star Trek and shit. Jeannie, well, she has a sudden infatuation with bad boys, and it starts with Charlie Sheen, but it goes on. It's kind of manifested in her brother too. You know, Ferris is a bad boy. Charlie Sheen was a bad boy. And she starts to become infatuated with him. And she spends 10 years like dating grunge rock guitarists, tattoo artists, your extreme sports figure every now and then. She's in the 90s now. She eventually grows out of it and marries a safe man with decent income. And, she, to shake her need to fix, guys, she becomes a nurse. and then she just leaves it all at the hospital. Cameron has a falling out with his father, naturally, and they never fully reconcile. They start to tolerate each other, but they never fully reconcile. But just just confronting his father, and it's all a load off of Cameron's back. And after that, he sort of lives his life as a normal person. He finishes school, but he sort of remains an incel like Gary and Wyatt throughout, until first couple years of college, and then he has a chance meeting with Sloane. She sparks some ambition in him, and they begin dating, and they fall in love. And just as Ferris predicted, Cameron fell in love and married the first woman that he met, although Ferris probably didn't suspect that it was Sloane. And instead of treating them like shit, they're out there living their lives. They got a modest family in Chicago, the suburbs. They're happy, and they even talk every now and then about that day that they skipped school. How crazy it was. Ferris and Simone don't make it long before Ferris goes to college, and he never finishes. He starts partying too much, spends too much of his time with like sort of this joie de vivre attitude, and he's carousing, he womanizes, and he's convinced that his charm and his ego will just carry him through life. And he starts a lot of business ventures. He never completes them. He leaves massive amounts of debt in his wake, usually that he puts upon, business partners or romantic partners or whatever. A couple times his parents, who are still gaslit after all these years, they're forced to cover for him, pay back his debts. He moves a lot. He sort of moves into a town or a place, burns everything down, burns all his relationships down. He moves on, spends some time overseas in various relationships that kind of last like 18 to 36 months or so. He eventually just scams everyone who ever loved him or ever meant anything to him, and his whereabouts sort of become, less and less known as time goes on. It starts to become like people start to become a constant reminder of his own failures and narcissism. So he sort of just kind of, it's 5 years, it's 2 years since we've seen him, it's 5 years since we've seen him, it's 10 years since we've seen him, and then no more Ferris. He just can't seem to scam, and nobody knows what happened to him. Anyways, that was the narcissism of Ferris Bueller. The next episode I'm going to do is the social awkwardness of Samantha Baker and 16 Candles. That's going to close out John Hughes for us. I figured I would just start with 3 Hughes movies because he was so influential to Gen Xers and latchkey kids and such. And I've got the childhood trauma of Conan the Barbarian somewhere up there, and a couple more. I got a list of about 10. Anyways, thanks for listening. Love y'all.